Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Trauma Talks in Truth. I am Dr. Isela Garcia,
And I'm Nina Vasquez.
and we are going to explore the idea of spiritual awakening. What does that look like? What does that mean? What different experiences do people have around spiritual awakening? Because I have to tell you that right now is a very transformative time in the world. And there are a lot of people who are awakening. Nina, what are your thoughts about that?
You know, I was just telling you, Isela, we've been on talking for like an hour. Like we should have been live, like talking about this. But I do feel like I'm walking through a spiritual awakening. I say of some sort because I don't think this is my first time awakening. Um, if I had to distinguish between like prior times, I was awakening to the trauma. I was awakening to the ego. I was awakening to my patterns, survival patterns. I was awakening to all of that, and also like being there when you're awakening. There's this invitation to go into them and heal heal the all of the muck, I call it. um, and it feels like a lot of death. It doesn't feel like awakening. It didn't feel like awakening for me. It felt like I was dying over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Um, this time, what I'm walking through is I believe my body is, I'm becoming more and more of a clear channel. And how I explained it to Isela is I feel like I have sensation and vibration all over my body, even on my face. Um, and she mentioned it's like a reverberation, like if you hit a drum a couple times and you have that ripple effect. And that's what it feels like. And I feel very open and connected. And in the past, probably last year, I would have said, I go through times throughout my life where I remember I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. But it wasn't, I would kind of go unconscious to that throughout my days. And I would just kind of go back to my unconscious self and feel lots of low vibrational emotions often. And over the past, I don't know, maybe a week, I've noticed that I'm connected more to my divine, connected to the source. I remember connected to God, whatever you want to call the infinite power that is, right? It's almost like I remember it and I always remember it. And I'm being guided by this infinite being. And I can feel my like yeah, last night I even like sat up in bed because I felt an emotion coming, and it was emotion around my daughter, and I just felt it coming, and I like put up my arms and I'm like, okay, like this emotion can come through me. I had a little tears, but I could just feel the sensation going through me, and just like it's just going through me, and I just feel oh, I can't explain it. So much love,
Mhm.
connection, and I'm being guided and pulled, and I'm taking inspired action and in a fulfilled way. And it, I was telling Isela, it feels a little weird, like my mind or maybe the ego wants to like analyze it, give meaning to it. And I'm just dropping into trust, trust that I'm being guided into the right. I think that's the key difference is last year I was going through like lots of ego deaths, I would call it, or they call it dark night of the soul, but really ego deaths. Parts of me were dying over and over again. And I feel so much more connected to love.
Mhm.
And I am, even at the beginning of this year, I was still struggling to trust, right? Like, trust I'm going in the right direction. And I'm taking action quicker.
Mhm.
Um, And there's this knowing that I'm going in the right direction.
Mhm.
And society may say I'm not, or you're crazy. But yeah, that's what my experience is this last couple of weeks of walking through this version of, or this
It's
part
like
of my journey.
it's an evolution.
Yeah, it's an evolution. That's a good word for it. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I often say to Isela, I have no words, but like I just had a lot of words there, but it feels internally like I have no words to describe this experience I'm walking through. And it just feels um, it feels like, like I'm vibrating and a little bit um, not
Hi.
grounded, a little high, but definitely
Mhm.
not grounded. And I'm reminding myself that it's safe to be here.
Mhm.
Yesterday, I had an experience where I did something uncomfortable, but I felt so alive. And in the past, if I had sensation and vibration going through my body, I would have felt so much fear. And it just felt like this is what it's like to be alive.
Okay. So I want to break this down.
Okay.
Okay, because you said something. I'm going to write it down real quick, so I don't forget this. Because you said that you had an experience, an emotional experience, and sensations in your body, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And in that experience, you would have interpreted that
Uh-huh.
as fear,
Yeah.
right? Or that would have scared the shit out of you before,
Oh,
right?
and I would have completely shut down.
And you would have shut down.
Yeah.
Okay. So I this this is a perfect example, and we're gonna back out of this kind of, and we're gonna land back here again. Okay.
And I don't even know what you're about to say. So this is so fun.
So when you and I first met, one of the first things, probably within a matter of a couple weeks, I did a reading for you.
Mhm.
And I did a reading, and just so that anyone who's watching this, Nina was already a life coach, like work already. You had already had a certification in your life coaching, right?
I
At the
think we
time?
broke up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
I said that when we first met, you were already a life coach,
Yes.
and you were already doing like coaching of others, and you had already done a significant amount of work, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of programs that focus on shifting your life, really what I call doing it from here to here, kind of this space here. So you start to recognize your thoughts, which I think are significantly important, because we do function. 90% of what we do is at an unconscious level. We all catch ourselves at times where you're driving from work to home, or you go someplace you don't even realize how you got there because
Yes.
you're like driving on autopilot, right?
Uh-huh.
So we go through life in this very sort of autopilot sort of way. So it is important for us to notice, where are my thoughts? Like, what am I thinking about? How do these thoughts create our emotional experience within my body? Like, we can start to recognize those things. And you can actually manifest from that space. You can manifest because you are mindful of what you're thinking, change your thoughts so that you feel better, and then you can raise your vibration to align or to create the very thing that you want to attract.
Mhm.
That's the formula. That's the formula. And so we met, and I'm like, oh, but I think you have other things going on.
Tell them what you tell them.
I
Tell them.
don't remember, Nina.
Okay, I will tell them.
Okay.
Isela, she pointed out, I'm just going to be really raw and real with you. She pointed out that I was living in a fawn response. And you use the word, you camouflage yourself everywhere you go to stay safe. Before she'd used that language, I did not. I knew that, but I obviously wasn't going to say that to anybody in public. I knew that, but I didn't have language and I did not understand it was a trauma response. And so she pointed that out. She also pointed out that it had started at a very young age,
Mhm.
very, very young age. And so she just like really pointed out that I was living in survival patterns, trauma patterns. And I had, at that point, I had done so much work, you know, and I was like, it wasn't like, oh, you're wrong. It was like, you're spot on. And thank you for the language, because now, like, I mean, after that, I think I bought, after you told me that, you actually said you have CPTSD.
Right.
That was the first time nobody in my life had ever said that to me before.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you look at my life, you would be like, duh, right?
Right.
But, you know, even, you know, the psychology, even the world, you know, society hadn't really caught up with uh, that term. So I bought that book by, oh, I forgot his name. It's back there somewhere.
Mhm.
And I started reading about it, and I'm like, why hasn't anybody ever told me? I'm
Mhm.
like walking on this earth. I met you when did we meet at Life Coach Live, right? It was like 2020. It was just after 2020 time, and people were finally going out, maybe 2021, 2022.
Yeah, it was right after COVID.
Yeah, we were finally getting out. We were going to go to a live. And I mean, that means I was 40, at least 41 or 42,
Mhm.
right? Probably 41. My whole life, nobody ever put language to what I was experiencing. So guess what I thought? Here's the key. And if you're listening to this and you've experienced trauma in your life, I want you to ask yourself if you've ever thought this about yourself. I thought something is wrong with me. Everybody else, I might start crying. I must be fucking broken
Mhm.
because everybody else has got their life together and I can't get my life together.
And there was shame around that, especially when you're around other life coaches,
Yes.
right? Who are like, banging things out and making
Yeah.
them happen.
And I'm over here struggle bussing, you know, and the way that oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Isela, you told me, I want to go back and listen to the recording at one point, but you said it's like you're like going up an escalator and coming back down the escalator, and you're going back up the escalator. You're literally just telling me this in our reading. You don't even know me, and you're like, you keep going up, but then you keep coming down. Let me tell you how I would explain it and how I used to say it. I feel like I'm an ant. I crawl up the ant hill and I freaking fall back down. And I
Mhm.
had did that my whole life. And I literally would explain that story to people. I felt like
Mhm.
that's what I would do. And I would fall all the way back down again into what I would call a deep, dark depression.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was the language. So I know I veered off, but go ahead.
No, I think that's actually perfect because just if you're watching this, a little bit of context here, and we tell our story a few times in old videos, and so, but we met. It was all divinely orchestrated. Like it was. I met her, and I got a message delivered from spirit, and something happened, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell her the message because it's weird. It's weird for me to just tell strangers messages. And so, but I felt like it was a message I needed to share with her. And so I drove away, I drove home. and I said to Spirit, hey, if I'm supposed to tell her this message, please make it so obvious, so freaking obvious. I'm not going to chase her. I'm not going to go through 400 people trying to find her to deliver this message. So the next morning I was getting out of my car at the conference center, and I look up and there's no one else around us. There she is walking down the parking lot, through the parking lot, and I'm like, oh shit. Okay, here goes.
Yeah. And I'm like,
And
hi.
so I'm like, "Ugh." And yeah, you were like, good morning. And you were just kept walking. And I was like, Nina, I kind of have something I want to say to you. And I delivered the message. And so we connected that day. And then we connected maybe just to, I think, once or twice, because I also hired Nina for coaching. And so she scheduled a reading with me. So really we didn't know anything about each other. And I basically what I do is I tap in intuitively to figure out, okay, what's really getting in the way of your peace of mind? Like what's happened in your life experience with intended purpose. Like all of our life experiences have an intended purpose. But now it's time to sort of heal, release, transmute, integrate, like all the things that we do once we become aware of the pain, hurt, and grievances that we hold on to. And so that's kind of where it started. It started from that place of having that initial reading, and that opened up all of the language, the understanding, a beginning of deeper awareness, and
Yeah.
then you just took off.
I mean, and I want to say this because in that moment, up until that moment, even though I had learned about thoughts creating feelings, creating actions, driving your results, like I still was in victim consciousness, meaning these things were happening to me. And meaning I wasn't creating them, even though I knew I had learned that intellectually. Because Isela does this thing called a soul's journey. She helped me understand what my soul, why did I go through all those things? What was the purpose behind it? And how, and we're here to like learn something in our life. And even I remember in the call, I was like, but I still don't understand what my soul's journey. And you're like, self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I think it was even more than that. That was one of them.
Yeah.
But I wrote down creator, right? Because, I won't ever believe that, my young childhood abuse I will believe I created that, and we can we don't want to get into that, but at some point in your life you start with your patterns, right? I was attracting toxic relationships
Mhm.
with my patterns, my
Right.
trauma patterns, and then so that's what led me to Isela. And I really want to point this out because I didn't continue to work with Isela.
Mhm.
I started to I don't know, I believe I was guided. And I've used a lot of practices on my journey of healing, a lot of different practices. They've all been like helping me peel one layer. And as I'm doing these practices, breath work, meditation, mindfulness, plant medicine, I mean, I have just gone down the rabbit hole. And I will say that Isela has helped me integrate at all points because sometimes I didn't know what to do with what's happening internally. So I'd get on the call and I'd just be a hot mess. And that's the ego deaths I'm talking about, like walking through an ego death after ego death, meaning like, for example, I mean, ego, I'm not like the ego is not dead, but like for an example of an ego death is like the version of me who was a people pleaser, for example,
Mhm.
the version of me who didn't want to forgive, right? What my teenage version of me would come up and she was like, I do not ever want to talk to my dad again. I do not ever want to I want to I wasn't protected. Like I was screaming from the rooftops. I mean, there was emotion after emotion coming up. And this was what I mean, I guess like 2 years worth of just clearing all these emotions and having to do what I call deep work, right?
Mhm.
Having to, getting on the other side of, I never want to speak to my father again. He didn't protect me. He should have, that's ego, right? And
Mhm.
so then walking through forgiving, right? And then also hating myself, another ego death, walking through forgiving myself. Um, just a lot of different I also on my healing journey dipped my toe into dating and saw those patterns come back up, and I would
Mhm.
it was like my inner wounded child would come back up because she wanted love, she wanted to be wanted, and then I would see it happen and another ego death, you know.
Mhm.
So that was That's what a spiritual awakening looks like.
Yeah, and I want to tell anyone who's watching, it looks different for each person, but I think what keeps us from the healing work is the fear of actually being with your emotions.
Oh, yes.
Um, I think the first part is, I have the 4 areas that I strongly believe is part of the journey. And the first area is really just reconnecting with our emotional state. And so understanding our emotions, allowing ourselves to experiencing them without it's like we have to come to an awareness that we have power over our emotional state, but somewhere along the road or our journey we have lost that understanding, and so we very easily can be overwhelmed by them, and then we don't have, because we weren't supported in all the ways that were important in terms of our emotional well-being, we didn't develop the capacity to be able to move through these emotional experiences. And so part for you, I think it was just connecting initially to your emotions. Like, what is it that I'm feeling, like really feeling? Because when people talk about feelings, they talk about from the headspace often, like, well, this happened, that's why I'm frustrated. This happened, that's why I'm sad. But where in your body is that? Where do you experience that? And
Yeah, that's huge, Isela, because I am actually in the process of redoing something that I like to give to people, which is like nervous system regulation tools, how to heal your nervous system. And the biggest part is to accept that you have emotions as a human. And imagine if we were 5 years old and one of your parents or caregivers knelt down and said, you have emotion, you're human, and you're going to experience emotion and feelings. And I'm going to give you some tools to work your way through those. But no, we were told, go to your room and come back, and when you have a pretty smiley face on,
Mhm.
right? Or worse than that, maybe there was physical abuse, right?
Right.
If you were shown. And so what I did was stuff in my mouth food and alcohol. And many people in my family did too.
Mhm.
And I learned it from them
Mhm.
as a like, yeah, we just like drink our feelings and eat our feelings.
Right.
We don't have feelings, right?
Mhm.
And so we think they're like wrong, but they're really actually superpower. you
Right.
know, you'll know if you're in a situation that your soul doesn't believe you should be in, your body will tell you.
Mhm.
Right. But I couldn't hear that because I had a lot of stored trauma in my body. And then I stuffed it with food. And that food got me through my childhood.
Mhm.
Food, I would say food was my mother.
Mhm.
And recently that addiction to food has moved to a different thing. And I still think that it's like my way of getting nurturing. Right.
Mhm.
And so once we learn that about ourselves, what are you doing to avoid your emotions? You can become that for yourself. So, if you're numbing out with food or alcohol or social media, then you start to say, oh, there's a part of me I'm not connecting with, right?
Right.
Because
Mhm.
I'm using something outside of me, right? I had 50 extra pounds of weight on my body, for a long time. And I was a yo yo dieter. And that's why, because I was eating when I wasn't hungry
Mhm.
to feel better, to avoid emotion.
Mhm.
And it still comes up because the mind, once you form the neural pathway of like, I feel, I eat, I feel, I eat, I feel, I eat. So it still comes up now. It's like, actually, no, 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 I'm not really hungry. Maybe I don't need to eat right now.
Mhm.
Right. And so all of that is, I believe all of everything we're talking about is part of this. Can be obviously spiritual awakenings. I mean, I've heard of people just having like a Kundalini awakening in a moment, you know,
Right.
that's not how mine has looked. What about you? I know that, you've been awakened like for a really long time. What did that look like for
Well,
you?
wait, I want to go back to my 4 things.
Go for it. Sorry.
Okay. So we have your ability to connect with and be able to identify your emotional state. I think this is a really important thing because what you mentioned before is, had you not had an awareness of your physical form and the sensations within the body, you would have interpreted that as fear and you would have shut that down. And
Yes.
so I have a silly analogy that I'm trying to work out, but it's kind of like a kitchen sink sort of thing. And so imagine like the kitchen sink with like your drain, your the drain on the sink, and that the water is actually turned on. Okay, so the water is coming out of the faucet, it's going down the drain. And what happens is we have all of these experiences in our lives, and it's like when hair gets clogged up, for those of us who have like long hair, or hair falling out, it clogs the drain. And so then you start to notice when the water starts to gather, and it's like seeping in slowly but surely. And so we've got to go in and we've got to unclog the drain in order to get the water to move through the drain, through the pipe the way it's supposed to. And so that's kind of how I feel about our spiritual awareness, because we are awareness. That's what we are. But what happens is spirit, source, divinity, all of that is speaking to us constantly. But because of all the stuff that we've experienced, our pipes are clogged. And so we don't hear the messages in the way that we, number one, don't hear the messages. And then when we do start to hear messages, we interpret them in a way that is based on our experiences of life. And so going back to the emotional state, understanding our emotions, starting to label them or just notice them and recognize that we can actually, manage them. It's a huge thing. Then really focusing on our relationship with our physical bodies, like you talk about it from a place of health and, physical wellness and that sort of thing. And there's also the space of just honoring the vessel by which we are utilizing in this time space reality. So what does that mean in terms of rest and restoration, and really listening to what our body is saying to us? Because our body is kind of like a satellite dish. It's the mechanism that receives and gives information. And so what you also shared, when you were sharing about what you're physically experiencing, you said that you feel floaty, you feel light, you feel, what's happened when you do these layers and layers upon layers of awakening is you're actually letting light in. You're letting light into dense, because we are dense, the third density,
Mhm.
we are dense. And so what happens is you start to heal, you start to align with that light energy. And so you start to experience light and that reverberation. I even feel it right now, the reverberation, the tingling sensation in the body. And that can actually evoke, because for me, yesterday, 2 days ago, I had an overwhelming sensation of love, an overwhelming sensation of love. And I just started crying. And I
Mhm.
started crying as I'm like hanging my clothes up because my husband folds them and then I hang them up. And so I'm like, tears are coming down. My husband's like, what is wrong? I'm like, I love,
Love,
love.
love, love,
So
love.
it's because, and you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be vulnerable to experience love at the depth of our truth. And so there's our physical body, there's our emotional state. Um, our intellectual self is the ego, where the ego lies. The intellectual self is important. Me telling you information about CPTSD was important for you to be able to
Yes.
uncover that.
Mhm.
For me telling you something like, hey, I think you're fawning. If I remember correctly, I don't think you've ever heard of the word fawn before.
Never.
And so that information was vital for you to go and explore what that meant for you.
Mhm.
Having said that, the ego's job is to self-actualize. Like it wants to be independent and superior and powerful and all that is, and it wants to be those things, and so it keeps us in this state of seeking. And
Mhm.
so it serves its purpose, but there comes a point where ego is really only going to go as high as our unhealed selves go. And
That's
so
so good. Okay, say that
Mhm.
one more time.
That
Ego?
ego is only going to go as high as our unhealed selves is willing to go. And so the deaths that you're talking about, the ego deaths, I actually call it the dark night of the ego, not the dark night of the soul, for that reason, because you start to come into the space of being with those parts of you, those experiences you've had, and they no longer serve you. And so they have to move through you. And this is what scares the shit out of people, because they don't want to be with the discomfort and the sadness and the overwhelm. And I remember because you were part of some of my programs that I did as you
Oh
were
yeah.
doing other things. So I
Yeah.
remember you and I connecting, and you're like, when is this going to end? As you're like sobbing, why won't this end? And I'm like, Nina, it's the journey. You have to keep walking. It's like you come to the edge of the fire, and there's a pit of fire, and you're like, I can't walk through this. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can't if you believe that you can't.
Yes.
But if you believe that you can, and you're going to be amazing on the other side, you just keep fucking going. It's like Nemo, Dory. She's like, just keep swimming. You just keep going. Yeah.
And those are pivotal times because I think, many people on the, say, psychedelic or plant medicine path, I am a strong believer and supporter and advocate of psychedelics. What people don't realize is they are not a magic. I mean, they're not a pill at all, but they're not a magic pill, right? Like
Right.
you're going to leave that space, that 5 or 24-hour, whatever you decide to do, space, and then you're going to be asked to walk through the fire
Yeah.
several times. And I'm in this space now where there's not a question. Whatever comes up, and I think this is where ego, so the ego, but I will identify as me experiencing the ego. Even for the ego has talked to Isela many times. Am I done healing yet? Is ego, right? Like I would be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I am done. I can't do it anymore. And why am I healed? And I literally recently had the audacity to believe I'm healed.
Mhm.
I am healed. And then I had an opportunity to see that that's not actually true, right? That fond response was bam, right in my face, right? And so I think that's really funny to think like, so we're always going to be unraveling and healing. I mean, many people don't like that word healing, but like going, unbecoming, remembering who you are, whatever, however you like to describe it. So you got to the intellectual. Did I stop you? Because we talked about emotional. We didn't talk about spiritual.
Yeah, so our spiritual is our sacred knowing. We come in with this. It's our soul and our connection to the oneness. And so I think the more and more you heal, and that's what's happened with Nina. She's like a perfect example of this, is that you went through all of the other areas that really require there is healing that's happening, and there's also reconnecting. So
Mhm.
we're remembering, and it begins with reconnecting with ourselves. It's reconnecting with our physical bodies. For those of us who survived traumatic experiences as children, we did what we needed to do to survive.
Mhm.
We also needed to move through the experience of forgiveness, because I guarantee everybody has somebody they need to forgive, including
Guaranteed.
themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah. We made decisions based on our unconscious awareness. We did the best we knew how to do, given our resources and our experiences.
Mhm.
And so there's like this journey that I think a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of us move through these levels and layers. And as you start to clear out, like that kitchen sink analogy, you start to pull out the hair, and all of a sudden the water starts to come in a bit clearer and a bit easier, a bit faster. And so what Nina has experienced is like quick visions, or she'll experience like a sensation. Even her language, your language has changed. Sometimes you will say something like, what I'm getting or what I'm feeling is, and then we'll describe whatever's coming to her. And it was was fascinating. This was not too long ago where you were like, I'm not getting any messages. And I'm like, okay, but you said what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking is. And I'm like, why the hell? What do you mean you're not getting messages? You're literally getting messages. But ego goes into overdrive and it goes, no, 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 no. That's not a message from the divine. And what I say to folks is true creation, true creativity is not an ego driven experience. It comes from source.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really fun experience because I was like, so I don't hear my spirit team or I don't feel like I'm getting messages from source. She was just laughing at me. Like, because we have this idea of what it's supposed to sound like or look
Right.
like or feel like or, and yeah, so that now I realize like what I'm doing is I'm starting to I guess, I wouldn't even use this term, but I guess I'm channeling, like I am allowing spirit to come through me. I'm allowing, um, I'm allowing guidance. I think that's what it is. And realizing that. So here's one of the things I've had to overcome. I walk through a life that the circumstances in my life led me to believe, and the things I did too, let's take real ownership of them, led me to believe I couldn't trust myself. But then I also couldn't trust anybody outside of me either to protect me or to keep me safe. So what does that look like? Well, then I can't trust God or the
Right.
universe or source because I can't trust. And then I also cannot receive because nobody is safe, right? And I had to forgive myself first to start to trust myself again. And then once I could trust my inner, like myself, then I was like, okay. Isela has helped me see that I'm not going to do the language justice but it's like, I'm not doing this by myself. And all the while I thought I was doing this by myself.
That you were alone.
I was alone in this world. Oof.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
we
We are
know
never
we're
alone.
not alone. Yeah.
We're never alone. We are never, ever alone. And part of that experience, Nina, that you're describing, yeah, trust is huge. Trust is huge for most people, because there have been time and time and time again where trust was broken,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
if you don't have trust within yourself, you can't give what you don't have. And so then it's, a tangled mess, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think once you start to do the inner work and you start to trust yourself,
Mhm.
then the next part, which I think is like the most significant part of the entire journey, is learning the art of surrender. And you've
Yes.
alluded to that, where
Yeah.
like you're like, I'm not sure what to do, or like allowing the messages to come through. But
Mhm.
the art of surrender is recognizing that you are not in the driver's seat.
Uh-huh.
And this pisses people off, especially the what is it called? The mind coaching people. What are the
Mindset coaching.
mindset coaching?
Uh-huh.
The mindset coaching say you are in the driver's seat of your life. You can
Yes.
change your life.
You
Change
can
your car,
change your
change your
life,
life.
change your mind, change your life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and I'm telling you, you have to drive the car initially. You do have to drive the car first because everything else was driving the car and you didn't even know you were in the damn car. So, like, you have to get to that place, right? But there does come a place where you have to get out of the driver's seat and you have to trust that source is aligned. Once you align to that source energy, source is going to create the experiences and the opportunities, because that is the law. The law is that you get in alignment with the truth of who you are at the vibrational frequency that you are. The law is that it will attract and align with the essence of who you are.
This is this is coming to me right now to share. if you're watching this and you have a mindset belief that I just give it to God, God will take care of it. I have compassion for you. I know how that feels. I'm just trained, just give it to God. The trauma that you experienced as a kid, the abuse you experience, the neglect you experience, just give it to God. He'll take care of it. I really want to tell you that there is, God created nervous system work. God created somatic healing tools. And trauma gets stuck in your body. So no amount of prayer is going to take that trauma out. You have to meet God somewhere. So I'm willing to show up and do this, and then I'm going to trust that that healing is going to open me up to connect with Source. And so if that's you, I'm not saying it's wrong, but if that is not working for you, think about this. We have a nervous system that our body literally holds energy, emotion, stuck energy in it. You are most likely coping in some way with that energy. Oftentimes it's self-harm. And then you say, let me just give this habit to God and He'll take it away. If it's not working for you, it's time to admit that you have a human body. And you might be feeling a nudge. Maybe that's why you're listening to us right now. And it's time to start connecting with the body. I would not have had and obviously this year in 2025, I'm kind of, it's like you said, there's four, what would you call it? Aspects
Of the self.
Aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm just now connecting to my spiritual self, or aware that I am. And it took the intellectual self, the body, the emotions, and I missed one.
No, you said them both. So it's the physical body, the emotional self. Yeah.
It took really clearing the emotions that have been really stuck in my body, and actually doing that healing work is what has brought me to the place where I can connect spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you feel pulled, we have a community, and in that community, it's free to join the community. And we serve you in that community. We teach you what we know, and we help you connect to your body and your mind and your emotions and spirituality. So if you feel pulled to do that, please leave us a comment, and Isela and I will share with you where you can apply to join the community. We also have a paid version that kind of takes the work if you're ready, if you're, at that point where you want to take your spirituality and trauma healing to the next level, you have that option as well. But it costs nothing to join the community. So if you feel pulled to do that, please come hang out with us. Let us get to know you and where you are. We would love to know where you are on your journey.
And I also have, as a part of the community, a sacred activism group that is kind of an extension of the community. So if you are really interested in what is happening in the United States and in the world right now, and you want to take an active role in shifting consciousness at the level that we are in right now, I have 3 significant parts within that group. One is about healing. And because what's happening is a lot of stuff is going to show up for you. Fear is the big one. Mm-hmm. And overwhelm is another. So why is that showing up for you? So it's the opportunity for us to explore what's really happening. And the next one is to stay informed. So I drop in things that I think are important about what's happening so that you don't have to feel so overwhelmed by all the things flying in your direction. And then I also have another area, which is how to stay active, get active. So I give you links about who you can call, what you can do, what protests are happening. And so this sacred activism is a really important part of, I believe, our unity consciousness, of our collective oneness. And it's learning how to be love. It's that love being experience, that we recognize the significance of every single person along this ride that we're on right now.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Isela, is if you feel called to that, I would not think of a better person to lead that
Mm.
than you. And so if you feel really called to that, please don't hesitate. Take inspired action.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for being here and listening. And if anything resonated with you, yeah, leave us a comment. We want to hear from you. We want to connect with you, and let this be a two-way conversation.